most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman. Welcome back to Being Heard, Two Black Women, Coffee and Conversations. I'm Lya, and with me is my co-host Dana. We're going to be discussing Trump, who has announced he is running for president and is back on Twitter. So sit back and enjoy your cup of coffee. Good morning, Dana. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic, Lya. How are you?
Girl, man, I'm good. But after reading that ex-president Donald Trump was going to defeat Florida Governor Ron DeSantis by a wide margin in hypothetical 2024 Republican presidential primary, according to a poll, and who's taking these polls is one of my questions. And then Trump received 55% of Republican registered voters' support, while DeSantis, his potential rival for the White House nomination, received just 25%, according to the Emerson College Poll Fund. This survey that was taken last week on the heels of Trump's announcement that he would run for the White House in 2 years, and after DeSantis crushed his Democratic opponent, Charlie Crist, in the Florida governor race, makes me go, huh. So, girl, how rise Donald Trump's presidency?
Oh my gosh, that loaded question. His presidency was, from being a journalist, I have one take on it that way, but being just a normal citizen like everybody else, I have a different take. And that take was that it was horrible. His presidency set us back in so many ways. And, one of the things that I always think when I think about Trump, and that is I fail to understand how anyone follows him. Like, for one, his wealth is being, drastically exaggerated. Everything he does is exaggerated. And, in some ways criminal, and in some ways definitely immoral. And I have trouble understanding why garden variety average people want to follow someone that is a known liar, that is, manipulates people, treats women horribly. But really, it's just the lying for me. It's the lying. Like, I don't understand how you follow someone who's constantly lying. So I don't know, Lya, what you think?
Well, tagging on to you on the lying part, as they say, the more you tell something, the more it becomes the truth. It's like watching, I always said when he said, he is the president, he says it and then people just follow along. And it's like, what kind of magic is he sprinkling out here? His presidency, I feel like for those of us who are not Black, it's like people are just realizing America got some racist viewpoints out here. And the fact that it took his presidency to shine light on that just mesmerized me. It's like, oh, Obama was the president and racism disappeared, and Iowa doesn't have any issues here because we helped to elect him. And it's like, ma'am, sir, racism been here. Like, it didn't go away, and Trump's presidency allowed people to get a little bit more comfortable. Like, I get it the first time around, you're sticking with your political party, but this second go around and you think he got robbed. I mean, I was listening to, who was it? It was something that was talking about how Trump basically got on air and how he admitted that there was something wrong. It was like when the debates was with him and Hillary Clinton, that there is something wrong with the system. Like they were trying to connect him to Russia. And he was like, no, I'm not. And then it comes out in the fold. Like, you got some big cojones to take work from work. I know who it was. Dave Chappelle. He had a Saturday Night Live special and he was going in. And I was just like, Dave, you be bringing it out, man. Like, not that I know you on first basis, but Dave Chappelle, like, you always be knocking it out the park. So I was like, yo, he right. Like, this man basically took work from home. Like, plenty of us have worked in the office. We're taking home pens and paper, but none of us take work.
The file cabinet. The computer, the laptop.
Right. Like, where in the world can you do that? So that, and then the insurrection. The fact that this happened under your watch. Like, you got people ready out here, armed and loaded. Like, we already knew bullets was flying off the shelves and people can't find bullets. But the audacity that you went to a Capitol building to take over, and then once y'all got in there, what was the plan? You know, were we about to witness folks getting shot, killed? Like, what was going to happen? And you got away with that too. Like,
right. That's the part I can't really. I just can't understand. Like, literally, we saw, him tell his supporters, what to do very clearly, and then they went and did it. They're hanging off of the Capitol like animals, and then, you essentially try to overthrow the government. So I still, again, I don't understand why you're not locked up. I don't understand why. Well, I do understand it. I mean, if we think about it, again, if this had been, Black Lives Matter supporter, if this had been anybody black or brown, it would have been the worst massacre in American history,
would have
because
been white, clean out.
wiped out. And those people, like some of even the Iowa ones, the Iowa, was it Doug Jensen or one of those, the ones that were up there looking for Nancy Pelosi and all of that, when they got arrested, they were wanting privileges like to still go on vacation.
I was going to touch on that. Their diet. I don't
Right.
eat meat. I'm like, the audacity. You got locked up. You don't got no more rights. Like, we are done, sir.
You tried to overthrow the government. Like,
The
I don't understand why.
government. Oh
Right.
my God.
I don't understand why you were never just in orange the whole time. Like, orange should be your color, okay? And then, like, I think some of them had home arrest. Like, it just, the whole thing is just it makes you laugh that it's just so crazy.
It's rooted in so much privilege, is what it comes down to.
It is.
And
privilege that shouldn't have been there, because, again, they're the first ones to talk about, people need to follow a law, or people needing to follow the rules. But they're the first people who don't do that.
But
they
who
don't
is the
do
law
anything.
written for, Dana?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. We know who was written
who
for.
Who
It
was the
wasn't
laws really written for? Who were the rules written for? Because all of that comes back to, I'll never forget when I was working in the government, you get flexibility, right? You have a flex schedule. And at that time, you could flex, half an hour. So say your time starts at 8, but you want to flex it, you're going to come in at 7:30. I'll never forget when one day I was sat down and told I had to choose the exact time I was going to show up, the time I was going to leave, that I had to pick what time I would have my lunch. Meanwhile, I was working with people who got to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, wouldn't take breaks or a lunch, so they could not only leave early, or they would stay longer and collect that extra credit time. And I was like, oh my goodness. So when I decide I'm no longer going to work anymore, I had a supervisor tell me my next job should be in human resources, because I knew what the rules were. And I was sitting there like, well, hot damn. Like, really? Is that what we going here? And I thought, you know what? We are the only ones, when I say we, black and brown folks, people of color, you got to know what the rules are, because you have to be beholden to them, or that's your job. So the fact
to
that
a level that no one else has to do. Right.
And to the fact that, like, so you, sir, the leader of the free people, and I'm going to put quotation marks if you're not listening, watching us, that you can come in and create all this turmoil over and over again, and there seems to be no consequences at all.
None. And you can still run again. Like, the thing is, he should not even still be able to run. Like, we shouldn't even be, trying to see what's going to happen with his campaign and worried about what he's doing. He should be, if not locked up, just somewhere out of public view. Like, we should have just roundly rejected everything that his presidency brought, because it's taken us to this place where the racists are out in the open. They're tweeting, they're causing havoc. They're influencing other people to join their cause. And none of that is going to be good for any of us. That we're living in an even more polarized society where the disrespect is just so rampant. I can remember back when Trump was running the first time, and he was somewhere down south, and it was, I want to say it was in like a public school. It was in a school building, I think. He was having a rally. And when they started putting people out of the rallies right then, putting out the black people, people of color, I said right then, how can you put somebody out of a public space? You know, don't our, tax dollars pay public spaces? Like, who is he to put someone out? I knew right then we're going down the wrong road when you're just ejecting black people from your. What do you think, Lya? Like, does it shock you to know you got that kind of support?
It's shocking, and then it isn't. Something comes to mind, and sorry, gonna have to go ahead and just say it. Uncle Tom's. You always need someone around to push and validate you. So if he got that small percentage there of us supporting him, then obviously he is not by any means doing anything wrong. And it's sad. I
When he
feel like
clearly is doing plenty wrong.
like when you even look at Herschel Walker, for instance, like I mean, all I can do is laugh. Oh my gosh, or Candace Owens, like those who we see and hear about, like she had a whole thing against, she left the Republican Party, but then she still holds these viewpoints. And I feel like sometimes you're lost. I do think you can be a black person and be in the Republican Party. I do feel that
and be conservative.
and be conservative. But I also feel like at some point something should bother you. Like, never have I been in circles with people and not being who I am. Like, I don't let people do the whole welfare queen stuff or say, well, all black women are this way. No, I am a black woman, and when I'm angry, I'm angry. I'm not going to let you take that power away from me being that way. So when it comes to our politics, I got you, but then I'm like, but Trump, like, do you not see where he's at? This is a businessman, and I cried. Like, when he won, I feel like his death. I mean, I was sitting there, and my husband had to console me, and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is where the country has come to. Like, is he really our president now?
And, right, the depression was real. The mourning was real.
Oh my gosh. But then to see, when I was out trick-or-treating with my son, there was a flag inside someone's garage in my neighborhood. And I was just like, y'all have got to be kidding me. Like, are we really going there? Like,
and out in Johnston, they just have flags. They had humongous banners sitting on the corner lots, like humongous signs. So it was a lot of support.
Kids had I don't know what you call it, but when they stamped on the back of the truck bed, poles of flags. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm like, where am I? Like, now I'm starting to go back and regret when I first decided to move to Iowa. Did I make the right choice when I came out here to the Midwest? Like, are we okay? But it makes me nervous.
Are we okay? Let's just unpack that for a minute. Are we okay? And I would say no. Like, when you look at even some of our local races, the way they came out, no, we're not okay. There's very few pockets where maybe we're okay, but the state as a whole, no, we're not. And having Trump come back on the scene, I mean, I can just think of the times when, like, our current governor, when he came to town and they're all kissed up, like it
smelled fishy, didn't it? It smelled bad. Like, you could look at the screen and just whole face all just mad. Like, oh my gosh.
How's that going to be good for us that everybody is so entrenched in their corners? But my thing is, you can be entrenched in your corner, but your corner can't be in opposition to people that look like me, living and having the full experience as an American. So you can have your views, but they can't be, to my detriment as a Black American. Like, right. That's just, and I think a lot of the views that they hold, Trump's party holds, and he appears to hold, they're in opposition to Black people, brown people, and that's not going to be good for this country, because now you're influencing and you're inspiring a whole new generation, really, of bigots. There's no
You're
other way to
you're
say it.
you're making them more emboldened. Like there used to be a
Right.
time where, if white parents would basically tell, don't say that you see a black person. Remember, we don't see color. Well, now we're teaching this whole thing of there's no such thing of this occurring, but you saw camera. Like George Floyd, I'll go back to it. Like this man lost his life over money and just being a black man, and yet white people are able to go in our government and overthrow things because when the government fails, if a government actually, that's what I thought was going to happen. So going back to that, am I okay? I thought, oh my God, because if they turn down the government, it's just a domino effect from there. When we don't have any positions of power, but then I go and remind myself, who were these rules made for, and why is it there? So if it doesn't affect your whiteness, you're not going to do or say anything. You are still comfortable getting up every day with the same status quo and not looking at how is this affecting those of us who are black and brown? Like, how is it going to affect us every day? I'll never forget, like with Obama, when he was in office, I felt the wrath of him being in office. Every single day I went to work as if I knew this man on a first name basis. And so when you flip it and you have someone who is creating, like you said, the divisiveness of our country and showing it, because that's what really happened. He got elected because he is allowing the quote, was it called the good old boys? What would it out and show, like Charlottesville. When you have a rally and you can
Very
go and
fine.
kill
What
people.
did he say? Very fine. They were some very fine people. Then wasn't it like some neo Nazis? Yeah,
Yeah,
he said they were very fine people. So you lost me there, because there is no. You can't call them very fine people and then tell me you're not racist and tell me you're not a bigot. Like that's where
very
you lost me.
fine. As if they are classy,
Right.
sophisticated. There's nothing there. And the only way we are going to be okay is if we can get beyond and say, how are we doing as Americans on a whole? Like, I know we're recording ahead of time, but we're in the week of the holiday. And this is a time where most families get together. There's food, but it kind of goes back to the American thing of it. How many of us food, whether this is a holiday week or not? How many of us have the things that are needed? Today I got news that someone very close to me, lost their job. And where is that shoulder of burden as Americans when we look at how is America now? What is the status of America? Will leading me into asking, what does this mean for us with Trump coming back into power? We've seen how he handled the whole COVID circumstances. We watched our governor chumming up to him in that moment. Like, what does that mean?
I'm still stuck on, and probably always will be, when in March of 2020 and Trump kept saying that the pandemic was going to be over with by Easter. Like he magically knew, saw, some magic, crystal ball. And it was like so many of his comments were just ludicrous and obviously wrong, but people still, and I hate to see us go back to a time, because to me that's ignorance, like just total ignorance. Even some of his own people at that time are like, well, remember Dr. Fauci at the time was like, no, he was always in the background of those task force meetings, kind of shaking his head like, like, don't listen to this guy. But if you're going to lead our country anywhere that's not down a dark hole into, the caca, we need somebody that's credible. He's not credible. Someone who has all these lawsuits that have been pending against him, the current ones that are pending against him, all of these lies that he has told, all of this money that he has essentially swindled. How can someone like that be in charge? And how can the American children view this person as someone to look up to Like, I feel like this country has really been set back by having someone who's, I'm sorry, he's going to go down in history as the most, divisive president probably we've ever had, divisive personality that we've ever had. He's firmly divided this country. And so now, but the problem with that is that division means that there's some people whose lives are, in jeopardy, whose movements are in jeopardy, who don't have the same opportunities as everyone else. If everything comes down to red and blue, then that's a good portion of the country that has to now be concerned, and that's not the way that any of this is supposed to work. I really, really, really hate, and I'm sure Lya, with you, being, having run for school board and things like that, I really, really hate that everything with the presidency and all of these political races comes down to how much money, someone has. Because I'm sorry, we're not getting quality candidates at that level when it takes so much money to win. And that's all it's about, because it really shouldn't be about that.
Like, it is, when I, blowing up with the campaign, little old me was ignorant to, this is why you raise money. And I keep asking the question, like, why do I have to have so much money? But it came down to how much money you can accrue shows how much people are behind you, which that is not inclusive, because
and it's not so much people as it is just the people with the money.
Yeah, the power.
It's just that small faction of people who have the money, and they're controlling whether or not this candidate moves forward, and that's just not good for the people. And the way this country was set up, some people call them forefathers. I certainly don't, but the people who set up framework of government, people always talk about how brilliant they are, and I'm not saying that some of the things that they did weren't brilliant, but I'm not sure that
let's break it down. Isn't it backwards for Thomas Jefferson to write the Constitution, right? Meanwhile, holding slaves, but when you went over to, was it France? And that wasn't tolerated there, and people are looking at you crazy, and they're fighting for their freedom at the time. And meanwhile, here you are, we weren't called the United States then, but meanwhile, you were in the same thing over here in America, and your slaves are sitting there like, wait a minute. So if I stay here, okay. Same thing happened to our soldiers when they went off to war. They got over in those other countries and was treated with the respect and dignity and that they should have been getting. But the minute they get here, you get beat up because you're wearing a uniform to help protect the freedoms of everybody.
That's denied, like, so much, denied your due, the money that was coming to you from the GI Bills and all this stuff. Like, it's this country in some ways, it's like one big joke to Black people, because any way that we can be robbed of not only money but opportunities, it's like that's what happens. And that's why we need somebody at the highest tiers of leadership that doesn't support that. Like, it's just, it's wild.
We need someone that is untouched and unscathed by the politics of things and just want to get in there. It's the whole thing I try to say all the time. Like, I don't have to like you to work with you. Like, there's always sometimes a common good that can come out of stuff. I have no issues if you're Republican. I have no issues if you're Libertarian. I have no issues with that. But we're trying to work towards a common good for something. How do we come to the table and do what's going to be amicable for everybody? How does this solve stuff? That's why, like, one of my biggest things during my campaign was, this is about the students. This is not about the parent. This is not, and it is about the teachers, but the stakeholder here is the students. How are we best serving all our students' needs? And if we're not trying to look at America in that same way, how are we trying to serve all the citizens better? We're not going to get anything further. We're going to keep going down a path of divisiveness and tactics that get nowhere. I want to see our politicians really think about going back out and asking the people, what do they want? when they're making these and because legislation is going to be coming up soon. You know, they got to start their new time. Like when you're sitting down talking, what are your constitute? I'm going to mess that word up. I'm not going to try my vocabulary. But what are the people in your voting district saying? What is it that they want to see happen to improve? And
What
not
irks me is just, some of these politicians, it's like they're reading off of a script, deviate from this kind of predetermined way of thinking. That is what doesn't serve us as a people. If I just have my talking points and I refuse to see your point of view. And I feel like with Trump as president, we're just going to have more of that. We're going to have the conversation go back to the border, and which harms so many people.
It shuts people down. One person I remember them sharing how their child got left over in the country they're from because he closed the border because he didn't want Muslims coming back. So I couldn't imagine that happening again where I'm here in America and now my child can't come back to me because you just shut off. I don't honestly like flying out of country because I'm like, you've now opened up that you can close that off at any given notice. And because I'm not white, I'm afraid you're gonna make me stay somewhere that I'm not even from. I do feel sometimes, as we wrap up, I feel like when people talk about, oh, you can go back to Africa, I sometimes don't really feel like this is my country sometimes. The fact that when I'm shopping out, I have to get my face made up and wear a particular outfit just to be seen to get the service that I deserve. You know, with him back in office, it's going to give that kind of precedence that these things stick. And it starts from the head and it trickles down. Like, how are we going to get our country the direction we,
Right,
and
because they don't follow laws, they don't follow rules. They make laws and they make rules, and they break any covenant that they're supposed to have with the American people. So how can we trust them? How can we be led forward by someone who doesn't think any rules apply to him, and people that look like him, and people with that level of money? The vast majority of American people are not filthy rich, and everybody's not a business owner. He's out of touch and always has been with the most American people. And I don't know how they can set aside their own morality or that's operating in their daily lives. I don't see how you can suspend your beliefs for someone to lead the country who is exemplifying none of that. Like in your daily life, if um, doing what's right is important to you, if not being deceitful and not lying and not stealing money and things from other people is important to you, then I don't see how you go and follow someone who is the king of doing all of those things. So I wish the American people would apply their own sense of right and wrong to the person that holds that office. Like, I just feel like they're suspending it. Like, they just, like, I don't know if it's the red hats. I don't know if it's the MAGA,
I don't know if you can do that when there's the thing of cognitive dissonance. That's how come, a cop can come and beat someone that's black or brown, but a white person holding a gun that looks like me, it can be, a lot of conversation like, sir, don't do that. And because of that cognitive dissonance, some people don't know how to disconnect from that and really go there. I'm not saying they're not people who aren't trying to do that, but I think that's what happens is it's hard to disconnect from that and not see it. But if people begin to do a lot more, for me, self-reflection of, like you're saying, check, is this really right or is this wrong? And if you find yourself feeling like it's wrong, then what are you going to do with that? And I think that would help us a lot more. So, Dana, what are your last thoughts as we wrap up on our episode of, because we talked, I wanted to kind of go back for you, for instance, I'll be more pointed, Twitter. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah. We didn't go to Twitter. So yeah, so I see that Trump is back on Twitter after Elon Musk gave him his privileges back, and I feel like I always thought that that's exactly what Elon was going to do, and when he took over Twitter, I almost feel like that's why he wanted Twitter. So Twitter, like use it, but again, that's just amplifying these messages to me of hate. It's allowing that type of language. It's allowing those more of that garbage to be dumped into the world. And so I think it's a terrible thing. We didn't need it. And at this point, maybe we don't even need Twitter. People need to think about that. Do we even need this platform that right away turned to be more hateful than it was before?
I
What do you
hope,
think?
well, what I'm hoping for is, because we create our own thing. That's just who we are as a people. People are like, oh, there's a Black Twitter. Yeah, it was a whole forum within this forum. It would be nice to see us maybe create our own thing and get behind it and stand. And I do get it's kind of hard to make something of your own when it comes and gets attacked. Anytime we create, sometimes it gets taken away from us. But I would like to see us as a group say, you know what, we stand behind, we don't like this, and remove ourselves from the platform. Because when you realize that you hold power, the more you'll begin to do. Like, the more I've begun to use my voice and advocate, the more power I see I have. And I do get attacks. I don't talk about them, but that's what you have to stand on, is your voice and how you're using your I'll say energy. If we don't give Twitter no more energy, right, we got our voice all day long. So, well, that's going to wrap up our conversation today. Going with Lya's thoughts and Dana's thoughts about, where is our country heading right now. If you've enjoyed our podcast today, we invite you to come and on our platform of Being Heard, Two Black Women, Coffee and Conversations. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Thank you. Have a great day.